You're on your own right there in the middle. I appreciate it, fellas. Yeah. So.
We're in this together, but.
By together, I mean you.
I appreciate that.
No, we don't.
When we first started, it was that way. It's like weird.
All right, we're going to call the October 10th, 2019 Isicsb board meeting to order, please. Holly, can I get a roll call, please?
Jeff Swearingen. Patrick Updike.
Present.
Peter Huffman. Marty Smith.
Present.
Tom Lampy.
Present on the phone.
John Benson.
Present on the phone.
Annette Dunn. Andy Buffington.
Present.
Ellen Hagan. Michelle Bischoff. David Ness.
Here.
Jason Leonard.
Here.
Rob Rotter.
Here.
Michael Casper.
Present on the phone.
Carol Lund Smith. Larry Smith.
Present.
And Angela Klauser.
Present on the phone.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Holly. Can I have an introduction of board members with those on the phone starting first? John?
John Benson, Iowa Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
Thank you. Angela?
Angela Klauser, Panorama Schools Member at Large.
Thank you, Angela. Mike?
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Thanks, Mike. Tom?
Bob Lampy, DPS.
Thank you. Is there any other board members on the phone that haven't sounded off?
Chris Myers on the SWIC, non-voting.
Thanks for joining us, Chris. All right, the board members that are present, starting with Sheriff, please.
Rob Rotter, Iowa County Sheriff.
Marty Smith, Iowa Department of Public Health.
Patrick Updike, Iowa Department of Corrections.
Jason Leonard from the Waverly Police Department.
Dave Ness, Municipal Police from Des Moines.
Larry Smith, Keokuk County Emergency Management.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago-Hancock County Emergency Management Communications.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to the Des Moines Public Works Building for allowing us to move into your facility here. It's pretty nice, actually. Can I get an approval for today's agenda, please?
Buffington, so moved.
Okay. Have a move. Can I have a second, please?
Rotter, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. Approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion for that, please?
Larry Smith so moves.
Thank you, Larry. Can I have a second?
Marty Smith, seconds.
Thank you, Marty. Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the minutes or any corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving them signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. SWIC report, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Leonard. Appreciate the time today, and I appreciate everybody with their flexibility with the new temporary venue. Hopefully everything worked out okay today, and I'll check back in when we get back to Des Moines. First of all, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, great. So greetings from Charlotte. Lieutenant Lampy and I, or Chair Lampy and I, are at the TIA, TRA, and P25 user needs and steering committee meetings. This is a normal activity for us with the board, with me as the SWIC and Chair Lampy as a member of the P25 steering committee. Lots of standards were discussed at length during this meeting. There's going to be some documents that are adopted later today after lunch on the Eastern time zone with respect to newly adopted standards. Once those are done, we'll have a brief out of those next month. We've also had some good sit-down meetings with manufacturers and user subject matter experts regarding topics like the ISSI, updates to managerial elements of encryption, and various elements of P25 compliance assessment testing. Also coming down the pipe for the board to kind of have awareness of, and when it is available, I plan on sending it to the technology committee, but there is a draft document that's being developed. If you look back through the history of P25 and the technology itself, there's an old document called the Statement of Requirements. That document has become outdated in large extent because it was produced several years ago and the technology has advanced pretty far since then. The new document called the P25 Statement of User Needs, it's in draft form and still being worked on, but it's something that's an attempt to kind of simplify what P25 consists of for the end users and serve as sort of a guidance document for agencies that are looking to move to P25. Anybody that's looked at system designs can attest that there's a large amount of complexities with any LMR system, and especially when you get into P25 trunking. There's a lot of benefits to it, but this document will help outline kind of what the feature sets are and try to translate the Greek to plain English for everybody. So, I'll try to avoid feedback. One other thing ECD is working on, this is a continuation of our SCIP update. It sounds like we're going to have one other webinar with one of our committees, so we're going to work to get that lined up over the next couple of weeks, and then from there we should have a draft document probably by the end of the calendar year, I think, assuming nothing gets delayed. If it does get delayed, that type of stuff happens. But as far as the update to our SCIP, it looks like we may have early adoption in early 2020, kind of like we initially thought. And then the shelf life of that document would probably be for 2 or 3 years before we would look to update it again. I do have a very positive update on status board for the board. Minnesota has executed the MOU that we approved a couple of months ago, and they've sent the source code to us. I've been able to download that, and we've started work on getting it compiled, set up, and we're working on finding a server for it to live on and develop login credentials so that people can start using it. My hope is that we'll have a demo ready for the Isicsb board in a couple of months, demonstrate its functionality when it's working, and of course some other nuances like procuring a server are ongoing with various agencies. One final item, interstate interoperability. We're gearing up for another meeting with Minnesota. Outreach to other states will begin within the next couple of weeks to schedule a couple of meetings. Just a quick synopsis on where we stand with that outside of Minnesota. Wisconsin's working on getting some personnel in line for their staff who we work with. Their SWIC retired. They're working on finding a replacement. Illinois, the MOU we approved for interstate interoperability with them is in their interoperability board for debate and eventual adoption. Missouri's been tied up with various instances this year of no-notice events, so we're going to work with them a little bit more closely now again since things are kind of calming down for them a little bit. Same thing with Nebraska and South Dakota. We're working on lining up some more meetings with them as well. As of today, we do have reciprocity agreements for users to be able to join both systems for interop with Minnesota, South Dakota, and Missouri. So that's all I have, Mr. Vice Chair, and with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris? All right, we're going to move on to Mr. Blake DeRushi. On one board.
Good morning, board. I Unfortunately, you're going to take a little bit more time than normal today. I want to cover the kind of the results of the peer assessment that we underwent over the last number of months for the 911 program. So we did receive the draft report, and overwhelmingly, we pretty much agree with their assessments, which I'll cover here in a second. There was a few pieces of things that we're pushing back on or providing additional documentation. So they have about 2 weeks now to get us the final report, and we'll see how that lies out. And we'll make sure to put that on our website, send it out far and wide for all to be able to read. But the initial kind of takeaway, the list of the strengths is very long, which I enjoyed seeing that. The list of the area for growth was much shorter. So I'm going to cover some of the highlights on the areas for growth that they pointed out. And again, I pretty much do agree with these. The things that they suggest we begin to work on. Authority to audit the surcharge collection. So right now, we have no ability to make sure what is remitted to us is accurate. Next, in conjunction with the 911 Council, establish minimum performance guidelines for PSAP call handling. So metrics to make sure that no matter where you're at in the state, telecommunicators are answering calls within the recommended amount of time, dealing with them, dispatching within the recommended amount of time, and establishing those performance guidelines. Adopt a nationally accepted standards or quality assurance. If somebody's on mute, is it here?
Train.
Okay, sorry for those on the phone, there's a train going on. Adopt nationally accepted standards for quality assurance and create guidelines for local boards to implement quality assurance data collection and be able to provide to our office. Prepare a statewide public education plan and then require emergency medical dispatch. So those were kind of the highlights of the strengths, or I'm sorry, the areas for growth, the things that we could work towards that they pointed out. Now for some of the strengths, strong governance code with the authority for next-gen implementation. They really thought we were on the right track with our shared services program through Zetron and Raycom. We have a good funding stream. The 40-hour training was identified as a strength. The data collection that we do for expenditures, also there's associated penalties for not providing that information. They thought that was a good thing. The I-3 standard, which the Isicsb board sent a letter of support for as well, being the basis of technology, was also identified. So really, summarized by, we're on the right track. It's just that the next-gen process is so long that we're on the right track, and this will give us a good roadmap of where we need to start to look towards. I want to pause there and see if there's any questions on the peer assessment before I move on. Okay. Next, on Monday, I know it's Columbus Day, October 14th, I am having a program update. That's from 1:30 to 4 at the Holiday Inn off of Merle Hay Road. That's in conjunction with Iowa, APCO, and NENA. That's going on Tuesday and Wednesday. Mine is Monday afternoon. So that's, by all means, if you're interested in 911, feel free to show up. And then as far as training approvals for the month, the council approved Delaware County for a course called A Victim's Plea through the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, Buena Vista County for Active Shooter through PowerPhone, and Marshall County was approved for a public education campaign that they offered to share any of their resources with. So that's actually the first public education that we've approved through that fund, so kind of note there. That's it for me. Any questions? Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair, this is John. May I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to congratulate Blake on all that hard work he did with the peer assessment. I don't know if many people in the room have actually had an opportunity to have outside entities come in and essentially crawl inside your program with a microscope, really take a look at it based on national best practices, national standards. It points to the work that Blake's been doing with the program for the last, I don't know, Blake, how long have you been there? However long it's been.
5-6 years.
And the excellent work that's been happening. When it was not just a simple one-day thing, that team was on the ground in Iowa for an entire week. So Blake had to essentially stop his work and participate with them. But I think it points to the the way our law is written and the benefit it provides, but also to the hard work that Blake has done to make that work. So, I mean, even though he does put work for my department, I still think it's fantastic work, and that report reflects on that. So I just wanted to say that publicly.
I appreciate that. On a different note, I'll piggyback off that, John. I know that in a small slice of heaven in northeast Iowa, I know that our own county basically says how prompt Blake has been every time they've had a question about things. So I hope that that's actually reflective of what he does on a statewide basis, and I think it's great. So good job.
Thanks, both of you.
Okay. Buffy, I'll hand the thing over to you with the UGC.
Thank you for calling me Buffy.
Sorry.
I had the unfortunate task of fishing during our last meeting, so I left it in the capable hands of Vice Chair Rob Dennert. Really, there was just standard stuff. We have 4 applications that will be in front of the board in new business. If there's no questions, that ends my report.
If there's no questions for Chair Buffington,
thank you.
We will move on to the Finance Committee. Chair Hagan is not on the phone. Can anybody else handle the finance?
Hey, Vice Chair Leonard.
Go ahead, sir.
This is Swick Myers. We will get the documents out to the board. I'm on remote and I don't have them in front of me right now, I don't think anyways, in summarized form. So I'll get those to the board as soon as I can, and we'll make sure that they end up in the minutes.
Okay. I'm not privy to this, Chris, but are you aware if the Finance Committee met?
I was not able to make that meeting either. I know they met, but I was not able to make that meeting.
Okay. I appreciate it. We're going to move on to the Governance Committee. Chair Benson, would you like to take that, or do you want to defer to Chair Ness?
I can do it. Thank you. Governance Committee did meet on last Monday, had a very sparse agenda. We will have one standard that we will be bringing forward in the new business portion of the meeting. It's not necessarily a new standard. It's an amended standard that had been previously approved by the board. We made some alterations to it, which I will describe later. Second item, which we did discuss, is we're going to get back to one of our primary missions identified inside the SIP, is creating a grant application process, and that means for either funding that the board receives and or equipment that the board receives. So we'll get back into that. Our goal is to have something done early part of the year, to have that in front of the board for their consideration. So as standards are starting to slow down, we can start to knock off some of the SIP responsibilities we have. That is the limit of my report. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
All right, hearing no questions, moving on to operations. Chair Bischoff is not on the line. Chris, do you have a report there?
Yeah, I do.
Marty, take it over.
Unless Chris wants to do it.
Marty, Michelle did send me an email following operations with a summary of what she was going to report, but if you want to take it, you certainly can too.
So I was on the call, and the only other person on the call was Holly. So we waited for a while, and there was no meeting. So the meeting prior to that, we've been meeting twice a month. The meeting prior to that, I was not able to attend, so I don't have an update. So there's no update unless Swick Myers has something from 2 meetings ago.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, so in operations, they are looking at legacy systems and future planning. They're discussing the need for the direction for what VHF users could have in their radio for interoperability. VCall 10 was identified as a possible option. That's basically a calling channel that's already available via licensing. It's a national interop channel, but they're looking at something like that to help facilitate a few more tools in the toolbox for the VHF users. And that's all I have from Michelle.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on to outreach. Chair Hagan obviously is not here. Is there another member of that committee here? Or Chris?
I was not able to make the outreach call. We may have to move on to outreach specialist Wagner.
Right, so Sean, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. So we held our RIC 5 outreach, and I'm going to ask Chair Smith to speak on that. I would much rather hear from somebody who attended in his home area and how he felt that it went, rather than me just my observations.
We hosted that down in Ottumwa just, 2 weeks ago. A lot of great questions out there when it comes to the PSAP training segment of it, in the morning session of it. There was great dialogue on how things conceptually can work and operate, and how to use the system. There was a lot of good dialogue in there. And in the afternoon, AT&T and FirstNet Group gave some exciting news, and David, I'm sure he'll elaborate on that after a bit. But all in all, it was very good training, and then I think I'm seeing or feeling a need for this PSAP training roadshow to circle around again, now that some of that equipment is actually landing on everybody's doorstep.
Very good, thank you. So with that, I wanted to acknowledge Holly's been working on the website. You should have seen some changes going on. We've also been working to look at some calendar changes based on the last board meeting, with, being able to show a training calendar with hopefully some sort of a table view underneath that. There were some issues with the last board meeting, and that's why if you're accustomed to seeing the small snippet videos, they were not out there. I was finally able to get those corrected, and they were posted last evening. Beyond that, we're looking at RIC 2 as our next outreach. I know we were just there a couple months ago, I believe now. That's kind of where Chair Lampy had kind of indicated that he'd like to go to next. And then as Chair Smith said, we will be looking at the PSAP Roadshow as well to demonstrate and help PSAP people use their new controllers and connect to the Isicsb platform. Beyond that, this month's newsletter will be doubly impactful and double the size, because last month's newsletter did not go out because of some of the issues that I was dealing with. So you'll see a pretty good sized list from AT&T FirstNet on the new towers and the new information that David's going to share. So I'll tell you that when I looked at his presentation, I didn't quite grasp what he was really going to be talking about. And then when he explained it, I was just like, wow. I got so excited I jumped up after the meeting and kind of had my own little, this is super exciting, this is amazing, to acknowledge it. So I won't take any of David's steam, but let me say I was very excited, and I don't get too excited about too much unless it's technology. So let's just say he has some really amazing news. So with that, I'll take any questions. Otherwise, I'll get off and head back to my chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Moving to the training committee, I know that Chair Lynn Smith is not on the phone unless she joined late. Is there any other member of the training committee present?
Yeah. Hey, Vice Chair, I can cover this.
Go ahead, Chris.
The topic of discussion was primarily the training modules that are being developed for the consulates control station. The video, the first one that we've done, was sent out for review for the committee, and we didn't hear anything negative for it. So at this point, the work moves into adding into the closed captioning to see exactly what that's going to look like with the playback. We may have to adjust the way the images pop up on the screen for closed captioning, but if so, that's not a huge deal. But that's the gist of the training report with respect to that. Otherwise, our next TAs were discussed. I want to remind everybody that we have a COML course that's coming up November 19 through 21 at Burlington PD. The sign-up form is available online for that. And I think as of today, we maybe have somewhere between 5 and 7 attended or registrants. I would encourage anybody to sign up for that wants to be a COML. Our minimum for the course is 15, so we're on our way, but we got to get enough people signed up so that we can ensure that we have it. We're also looking at possibly hosting an INTD course out by Carroll. Don't have a hard date on that yet, but we're working on logistical aspects with that. And that's the report.
Thank you, Chris. Technology Committee Chair Updike.
Thanks. Technology met on September 26th and October 1st. Most of the work was accomplished on the October 1st call, but I sent out a draft to all of the board members. We have a rather chopped up draft of this co-locate issue. We went through a lot of the electrical requirements, vertical structure requirements, building requirements, all of the things that goes with co-locating on it. I feel like we're getting close to kicking this over to governance and operations. I think we'll do that prior to the next meeting, because they're going to have to really dig into the MOA section of this. So when you look at that draft version, it's pretty watered down when it comes to the MOA. That's not our bailiwick. So they can deal with that, and so I really think that we're going to be ready to move this prior to the next meeting. But I told the technology members I want to go through this one last time, and I also threw at them to also consider the potential for how does this affect any enhancements that are being built out. You know, will we be involved with that? So I want to get that discussion on the table before we kick this over to the other committees to deal with it. So that's about it. We'll keep you updated. And I'll redress that document so it isn't all marked up and chopped up like it is. It'll probably be down to about 1.5 pages.
Yeah, I see that there's been plenty of stuff that you've stricken from it already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. FirstNet Broadband Committee, Chair Bischoff is not here. Chris, would you like to take that over?
Yeah, yep. So the FirstNet subcommittee had their webinar from AT&T on local control. I was not able to attend that one either, as I was on travel. But it sounds like it was a good webinar, and they plan on having a uplifting webinar next week presented to them. So I'm sure Chair Bischoff, once he returns, will be able to summarize those for the board and give everybody the inside scoop on that. So that's the FirstNet subcommittee report that I have available to me.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the LEA Committee, Chair Stufflebeam, would you like to take the floor, please?
We continue to have the open discussions with the Operations Committee so that we make sure that we're working under the standards that they've already created, and also to make sure that we're not duplicating our efforts. As far as the co-location sites, which are the sites that have 2 huts in 1 compound, we are continuing to work with Motorola on the testing and reconfiguration at some of the call centers. At this time, most of the work has been done. Most of the testing has been done. We have 3 sites right now that have to have some work redone on them and the testing done again. We continue to work with Swick-Myers to make sure that the control stations are distributed, and that's all on track, that training's on track, and that the testing with those PSAPs are also on track. The letter that was approved last month was sent out, and we are also exploring the most efficient ways for us to send the notifications out to everybody on a schedule that's going to be prepared. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Done. Thank you, Connie. Moving on to other reports. Information sharing amongst board members.
I'd like to say something, please.
Patrick?
Last September 23rd to the 27th, I got to take a CompT class down in Clarinda. I'd like to thank Swick Myers for getting that lined up. I'd like to thank Chris Griebert and Roger, the fire chief down at Clarinda, for allowing us to have that class there. And of course, thank the students that were able to make it, because without them, then, and our trainers, I can't forget about John and Arnie too. So
very good.
Thanks for letting us do that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other board members? Tom on the phone? Anybody else?
I apologize. We just had the fire alarm go off at the school, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening there.
Okay, Angela.
Captain covered.
Okay. Moving on.
Hey, Jason.
Yes, Tom.
I'll bring something up real quick. I sent out a all points message to all the PSAPs was it yesterday? And the reason I sent that out is there was some misconception about the use of the control stations by some of the PSAPs, and where they got their information, I don't know, but we like to nip these things as quickly as we can. The impression that the PSAP got when the control station was being installed is that they needed permission from the state to talk on it, or to talk on any interoperability channels, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So I wanted to make sure I got it out to all points, and I made reference to Leah, mutual aid, just like we've always done, and that's what that regional channel is that you should be parked on. So I want to make sure that you can use it, you should be using it, get used to it, and I just didn't want anybody to be had the wrong information. So that's why I sent that all points out.
No, I appreciate it. I guess I always took it for granted that interoperability really wasn't owned by any certain entity. So I guess thank you for doing that, just in case there was some misconceptions about that. That's couldn't be farther from the truth, just like you said. Thank you. Anybody else? Comments? All right, Motorola.
Yeah, hey, this is Chris here really quickly, just to update everybody on the consulate and control station. So far with successful test calls, we're right at about 50 or 53 successful test calls so far. If you remember, we ordered about 100 of those things, so we're more than halfway through. And I want to send a big thank you out to the PSAPs for working to get those things installed. And we've got another set of test calls lined up for next week.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? All right, moving on. Motorola Project Manager Isicsb update. Do we have a representative from Motorola here? We'll move on. The FirstNet AT&T update. Have the floor, sir.
As soon as our technology cooperates.
For those of you on the phone, we're trying to get our slideshow presentation brought up. And Sean is not successful at doing it so far.
It worked in test.
He did say he was really excited about it.
I think I caught one of that too.
Yeah. Settle down, Sean. You'll be all right.
No pressure, Sean.
While Sean works on that, I'll go ahead and talk about the exciting news that
that he was talking about. So we're trying to load the build map for September is what he's working on, so I can show you the sites that were done during the month of September. So, but the exciting news that I was able to talk to the RIC 5 outreach was we have now gone live on all U.S. Cellular towers. That was effective last Thursday. So AT&T is now roaming on all U.S. Cellular towers. It's actually in 16 states, so it's not just Iowa. It's Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin. But the territory I cover, Iowa and Nebraska, we're live on all those towers. The one thing I do want to reiterate to everyone, at the moment, only the orange AT&T SIM card is available to work on the roaming. Unfortunately, something was overlooked, and the black FirstNet SIM card is not working on the U.S. Cellular towers at the moment, but our engineering department is working to get that obviously corrected. So in the meantime, for instance, we're working with a gentleman at Pulaski Fire Department, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the orange SIM card because they're wanting to go ahead and take advantage of FirstNet. So even if with the orange SIM card, if they're on an AT&T tower, you will still have priority and preemption on the network. There is no priority and preemption on the U.S. Cellular towers. It is only voice and data communication, but our intent was, while the build is going on, we wanted to ensure that people would have communication on the network. So if you're in an area that is predominantly covered by U.S. Cellular at the moment while we're continuing the build plan, then we're going to use an orange SIM card for those agencies. So for instance, with Pulaski Fire Department, since they're in southwestern Iowa, which is mainly covered with U.S. Cellular, we're going to start them with the orange SIM so that they can take advantage of the service. When the build is complete in that area, we then switch them over to black SIM and any other agency that we have to do that for. But the exciting news is that it is finally live. It happened a lot quicker than we were anticipating, which was really good news. Just the bad news is that they didn't turn the switch for black SIMs, but that is in the works, so we will have that corrected. The new sites that went on air in September, you should have up now on your monitors. We did 10 new sites in the month of September. They are in Coggin, Keota, Keystone, Manchester, Manly, New Hampton, Ryan, Sigourney, Wayland, and Stronghurst. So total that we have done since the build first started, when FirstNet was signed on to, is 112 sites in the state of Iowa, with another 75 planned sites still to go. A lot of that build that I showed at the RIC 5 meeting is in the southwestern part of the state because there is a really lack of coverage there at the moment, and that's where the build plan for 2020 is going to be occurring. Again, that's why I'm going to be using orange SIM cards for any agencies that would like to take advantage of FirstNet service in that area at the moment. For anybody that would like to see build plans, since I'm unable to email them to Sean because of the proprietary information, I would be happy to show them to you. I do have build plan for the state of Iowa, and I also have the U.S. Cell coverage maps to show. I did show them at the RIC 5, and it's actually pretty impressive, especially with the U.S. Cellular sites. It almost looks like a Christmas tree. There's so much green on there. So again, anybody that would like to see the build maps for the state to show you what's going to be the rest of this year and what's going on into 2020, I'd be happy to show you those, or if you'd like to see the U.S. Cellular coverage. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I'd like to see that afterwards.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to show it to you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I told you it was exciting.
All right, Jim Lundstedt, do you want to come up to the mic? We'll keep moving here.
Sean, I forgot my HDMI adapter. Can you help me out? You have to love it. Once a geek, always a geek, man. You know, I'm only missing my propeller hat. Good morning. couple of quick updates for you. As Chris Myers reported, the SCIP plan is in draft form going through internal adjudication. We will hold a webinar with one committee to work over the goals and objectives to try to address some questions that came up during the workshop. I think we will meet and exceed the time frame to get that back to Iowa so that it can actually be in the SWC's hands before December 1st. That is our goal. Attended a multi-agency exercise in Northeast Oklahoma 2 weeks ago. And there's a nexus for why I'm telling you this. We had 250 public safety telecommunicators, technicians, and 38 mobile command vehicles and sites on wheels, including all 4 major wireless carriers that were players. During the exercise, as part of the state of Oklahoma's FirstNet outreach team, we tasked one of the ComLs and ComTs with performing an AT&T FirstNet uplift. So when you registered for the event, when you checked in, if you had a FirstNet phone, you gave them your 10-digit phone number. They built a spreadsheet, put that into the uplift portal, and then all of those people who were so identified got a text message telling you you had been uplifted as of a certain time and when that criteria expired. It worked very well. What did we learn? Fat fingers are ugly. Anybody who has ever built a code plug, built a comm plan, knows that 537 is different than 573. So we will have some opportunities to do some training. What I wanted to emphasize, the technology works. There's a lot to learn yet, but it was flawless. I think people were really excited how cleanly it worked. And although we were not in an area where we had network congestion, we did have good band 14 coverage, and we had participation from T-Mobile, first time I've ever seen a T-Mobile emergency response unit, as well as Verizon and Sprint. So pretty good overall exercise. Going to be repeated in 2021, and they told me to be sure and invite Iowa to attend. We had 18 states represented this year, and we had interest from as far away as West Virginia and California in the upcoming exercise. On September 25th, the National Emergency Communications Plan was released by the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. There are a couple of key tenets or drivers in the plan. I'll just mention that elements that inform the plan came from the SAFECOM nationwide survey, as well as input from the SAFECOM advisory group and the National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators. Focus areas in the plan include next generation 911, LMR to LTE integration, understanding the impact of the Internet of Things on public safety communications. I jokingly like to tell people I am not prepared for my toaster and my refrigerator to be talking at night when I'm not in the loop. But let's be honest, the number of sensors, cameras, and other technologies that will drive the Internet of Things to some 50 billion devices in the next 3 years can be both exciting, challenging, and perhaps useful to public safety communications. We also are going to take a crack at data interoperability, one of the lanes of the interoperability continuum that we've kind of winked and said to be determined. First challenge will be app level interoperability as well as CAD to CAD. And if that isn't enough to make you think, wow, that's a big bite, it is. CAD to CAD alone will be a huge lift for us. Finally, the last two drivers, the development of public safety broadband and other complementary broadband technologies, and of course the ever-present cybersecurity elements. So the 6 key focus areas in the updated NECP will be expanding and making governance models more adaptive, a cybersecurity element to try to inform public safety and set some baselines for us to be more robust, advocacy for greater sharing of infrastructure. And this one points primarily at federal agencies, and this is not as important necessarily in Iowa as it is in some states, but there are a number of areas in the U.S. where federal agencies have very robust and desirable tower sites and land that are essential for public safety communications, and we've not been very good at sharing. That's just the honest truth, that there are sites that tribes, territories, states, and localities desperately need access to shared infrastructure, so we will be taking a look at how do we get the federal government to do a better job of sharing. We're also looking at expanding the concept of resiliency in public safety communications. In the 911 world, we've worked for quite a long time to have backup centers, alternative plans, but how do we look at network resiliency? How do we become more robust and adept in that area? And then finally, some recommendations related to coordination. Federal, state, local, tribal. How do we improve that? That's been a gap for some time. Two other quick things. In the news a few months ago, I think many of you probably heard that there was a hacking incident in the state of Ohio against their statewide radio system called the MARCS, the Multi-Agency Radio Communication System. Yesterday, the Stark County Sheriff announced the arrest and indictment of 5 individuals in that case. It ranges everything from improper use of telecommunications and stolen technology to impersonating a police officer. Prosecution is pending. That is actually good news. That has been a very, very, very robust investigation. And the key is, yes, the information can be stolen. IDs can be cloned. A lost radio can be read against a lot of different things, but we were successful in bringing this to prosecution, and we'll see the outcome to be determined. The last thing I had on my list for today is I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. If you happen to be interested in taking a look at how your agency can be involved, DHS Stop, Think, Connect campaign, we have 100 different ideas and suggestions for you. Key focus areas this year: multi-factor authentication. It's the way of the future. When you log into a website, you get a database or an application, you get a text message or an email that confirms that it's you. Second, the use of strong passwords is always encouraged, but changing the strong password is also a very, very important element of that. A lot of us develop that great strong password and say, wow, I can remember that, so you don't change it. Once it's compromised, and the ugly side of it is, it's so good, I'll use it on this system and that system, and then presently when you are compromised, you're compromised in many, many places. So the effort this year is to reach out, to talk about it, remember, stop, think, connect. Emergencies in email are seldom real, and most of the mistakes that we've made that result in cybersecurity compromise are the result of phishing or visiting improper websites. Any questions for me?
Yeah, so was this hack an inside job?
No.
Okay.
Lost radio.
So on top of that, maybe you don't know this, Jim, the indictments that were made, were they Ohio residents or were they outside? Or
Ohio residents so far.
Okay.
There is a question, an unanswered question right now about how the key was executed and duplicated. Feds are involved in that side of it. This is a pretty high level thing because we want to know how this happens. We know about cloning phones, we know about cloning radios, but when you get into cloning public safety sensitive assets that allow you to appear to be a valid user, that's a concern. So I think that one will bear watching, but at least we've brought it to this point where there are 5 individuals arrested and indicted. So I think the next step is to how do we fix it.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Melvin, are you on the phone?
I am.
Would you like to give your update, or are you still trying to get to this facility?
No, I'll do that. Apologize for the confusion there. So my update is, like I said before, they keep on getting smaller and smaller. I've been this morning at the one of the core locations because we're doing some final tests. And I believe today, by the end of the day, we'll be completely done without functional testing. So we did some switching of the cores again today. So overall, the ATP has moved forward as planned. And then the coverage testing, again, we completed the DAQ testing and the BUR testing. Those two were related to coverage with all the counties except for the two upper northwest counties. That's due to the Rock Rapids site not having been built yet. So with the testing completed, we got engineering that's tabulating all the results for the DAQ testing, which is managing a whole bunch of files that have been assessed by a team of people who look at the results and score them. So we're in the process of processing all that data, and it's a lot of data. And then with the Rock Rapids site, we expect the building permit to be issued on the 15th, which is next week. And then we plan on start doing some foundations work starting next week, as long as weather cooperates for the Rock Rapids site. Remember, the Rock Rapids site is complicated because it means that we got to build a twin tower. We got to move all the broadcasting stuff over. We got to put our stuff in, and then tear down the existing tower. So it's very complicated, a lot of moving parts. So it's taking quite a while to get to this point and get all the agreements in place. And then the last piece is the Hardin site, which we've been working with the City of Iowa Falls to get certain things in agreement so we can finish up what remains to be done. So that particular site is up and operational. We've been able to complete the security fencing around the compound, and what remains to be done is the other things that fall under trees and erosion control and stuff of that nature. That's all I have for Motorola.
Thank you, Melvin. Any questions for Melvin? All right, moving on. Standards Working Group, Swick Myers.
Yes, thank you, Jason. For the Standards Working Group, their most recent work product revolves around the updated participation standard that was sent to governance, and the UGC also. That's up for the board approval today. Plan to continue to look at alert tones and how that may look with announcements and things like that. There's active discussion ongoing with that. And then the project technology committee is working on with respect to the hanging of VHF resources on Isicsb sites. Once that's done, that'll probably be incorporated into a standard as well, or at least we'll have a standard that references that policy, whatever shape it takes. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions for Chris? All right. Since there's no old business, we'll move on to new business. I'll turn it back over to Chair Buffington for Isicsb users.
Thank you. The user group committee at our last monthly meeting reviewed and approved the following for recommendation for approval. So the Saragordo County Sheriff's Office Level 3, Coulter Fire Department Level 1, Taylor County Level 2, and Wings Air Rescue at Level 2. UGC, through myself, makes a motion to approve these 4 applications for access.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor to approve those 4 applications of Saragordo, Coulter Fire Department, Taylor County, and Wings Air Rescue. Do I have a second?
Ness.
Thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any other further discussion on those 4 applications?
Yes, I have a question.
Patrick?
Was there any follow-up with Mick at Taylor County? Because there was some discussion about the 29, I believe it was 29 talk groups.
Hey, Patrick, this is Chris. I didn't have a chance to follow up with him directly, but their application is very similar to some other ones that have gone through, like Ringgold and Adams. I think the question was just more so along the lines of whether it was a 10-year plan or immediate access, right? Or did I don't have my notes in front of me, but that was the bulk of the question, right?
I don't recall.
Yeah, because I know the loading came back fine. Motorola, when they did loading analysis, said everything looked good, but I think we had a question on the something with the implementation of it. I remember the movement to the board being done, and then some follow-up work to be checked in with Nick to see kind of what their implementation was for that. But I didn't have a chance to talk to him when I was at ComT because I had to leave right away.
Understood, thanks.
One comment I'd like to make on that is there was some question the user group committee had the other day about this one application that had, what was it, Patrick, 20 plus talk groups requested. And there was some dialogue within the user group, are we the jury, or what is really our authority to approving the application? Should we really dive into it, or do we just look at it at the overall loading level of it and not trying to dissect what they're going to do? So that was kind of a question we had internally, as I feel. I'm sorry you weren't there. You were having fun reeling the big fish in. About what our authority is on approving some of the requests for it. So this will be a consideration that the user group committee, I'm sure, gonna discuss within themselves.
Okay.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're looking at loading, making sure that we're protecting the availability of the system during critical communications. So, we turn it over to Motorola before it ever makes it to the UGC now. That's one of the things that we've changed over the last 6 months is prior to UGC and myself as chair to even say we're going to put this on the agenda, we need to hear from Motorola saying, have you done the loading analysis? Does this applicant participation plan create any problems with loading, given the geographic area, number of users, anticipated users, and things like that? It's kind of the long and short of it. And if Motorola has no problem with it, obviously we want the user group committee to look through it and ask questions, just like what's been done, and they'll continue to do.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, it's been moved and second. We've had some discussion. Everybody in favor of passing these 4 Isicsb user group, 4 users, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. New Isicsb standards approval. Mr. Benson, are you still on the line?
I am still here.
Go ahead, sir.
What you have in front of you, I briefly mentioned during my portion of the brief out. It is the requesting access and participation. It did have some minor, as I said during the earlier part of the meeting, this standard was prior approved by the board. We did make some edits to that. In brief, the edit primarily focuses in section 2, the technical background. We moved the first part of the first sentence down. That used to reside up in the purpose or objective. And then we added into the level 3 user area, or the information regarding a core connected dispatch council. There were also some edits made further into the document with regard to the correct usage of requesting entity to make sure that was carried forward into the rest of the document. Those were the changes that were made to the prior version that they had changed. As such, as the chair of the governance committee, I would make a motion that the board approve standard 2.8.0, requesting access and participation.
Thank you, John. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Buffington seconds.
Thank you, sir. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion before we move forward? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. That takes care of our new business. We're going to move on to public comment. I'll open the floor to anybody that has a public comment or on the phone.
Vice Chair Leonard, I got one item here. Following Jim Lundsted's about this Ohio situation, I got a question here that's popped up. You know, should someone in Iowa look at Iowa code to ensure that we have all of our legalities named in there, so if something would come, that way the attorneys and everybody would have the proper legal authority to, just food for thought.
That is something that we want to take a look at, Patrick.
Well, we dealt with this to some degree in the technology committee, and I know John Benson is aware of this because we were trying to figure out how to protect the system, but then by default it falls under 22.7, you know, as far as the confidentiality part of it. So I don't know if that's going to play a role in this. But, you know, if you lose a radio or somebody steals it out of your vehicle, I don't know how you can. I mean, you've already got laws against stealing something, so I don't know if that's...
This is John. I can add a little bit of clarification to this, Larry. With regard to these communications type systems, particularly at least on telephone systems, I don't know about radio systems, we'd have to take a look at it. But generically speaking, critical infrastructure and efforts to sabotage those pieces of critical infrastructure by Iowa law, because we ran a bill 2 years ago on this, makes it a Class B felony, and I'd have to go back and look at the punishables, but I believe it's up to 25 years in prison and a minimum of $80,000, if not $100,000 fine. So there are provisions out there that deal with those type of things presently.
Okay, I just want to ensure that we're not overlooking an opportunity here to enforce code.
Right. I think part of what I caught Jim saying is that he said the feds are involved, so obviously there's federal indictment on critical infrastructure that probably took precedent there in Ohio. It would probably be the same here. You know, obviously John basically just, you know, educated most of us on being a Class B felony here in the state of Iowa as well. Looking that up, obviously, without looking for it, but I think that was very similar to Ohio. We would probably follow along with the same format that Ohio probably did by using the federal government to actually step in on something like that and tampering with critical infrastructure. So, anybody else? Great question. Anybody else for public comment? All right, seeing none. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Patrick?
Rotter seconds.
Sheriff Rotter, thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody on the phone.